One of the legacy lawsuit issues is that there have been decisions that have come out of our courts that have compensated landowners for damages far and above what the actual damages are for some of the oil and gas operations that have been going on in our state for many, many decades. I don't think there's any issue with compensating for actual damages because that's obvious something that's equitable. But when the settlements get into and the judgments get into multi-millions of dollars that are not related at all to any of the damages that might have been caused, that's when there's a problem. And that's when the legislature begins looking at what can be done to amend the laws to make sure that those types of decisions and judgments more accurately track the actual damages that have been inflicted.
We're number one in the nation for having the highest jury trial threshold. We're going to talk more about that later. We're number two on the American Tort Reform Association's list of judicial hellholes, essentially a listing of the worst places in the country to be sued. We're ranked number 7 on the National Tort Activity Index, which looks at 3 different measures of tort activity, including a concentration of lawyers, total number of lawsuits, and the largest verdicts in each state. Likewise, we found ourselves at the bottom of all the good lists. We rank 47 out of all 50 states for having and enforcing meaningful venue requirements. It basically means our laws kind of allow for shopping of favorable venues. We're ranked 48 for judicial impartiality, meaning there's significant concern about the ability of defendants to get a fair shake before some of our state's elected judges. And overall, Louisiana courts place 49th out of all 50 states for overall legal fairness. New Orleans has also been specifically noted as one of the worst top 10 local jurisdictions in the country. As further proof of the problem, I also like to point out the Center for Public Integrity. In their 2013 Corruption Risk Report Card, they gave us an F for judicial accountability, and then you can see the numbers there. I mean, we barely got a passing D on one of them. Now, I'm sure most of you know the Center for Public Integrity is not exactly a conservative or a business-oriented group, and yet their findings as it relates to Louisiana's judicial climate are consistent with nearly every other result of a survey on this topic. And so there's a pretty broad consensus. And it's not just the national groups that say lawsuit abuse is a problem in our state. Individuals and small businesses who live and work in Louisiana recognize it's a serious problem as well. The Coalition for Common Sense conducted a survey of voters just before the start of this 2014 legislative session. These are some of the top line results. 72% of respondents said they agree there are too many lawyers filing frivolous lawsuits in Louisiana. 69% acknowledge the direct correlation between lawsuit abuse and the depressing impact it can have on jobs and investments in our state. And perhaps most importantly, 76% of voters agree that our state laws need to be strengthened to limit lawsuit abuse. That's certainly what we're working on this legislative session. And Jim is going to give you an update on the specifics of the bills a little bit later today. Lawsuit abuse affects average, ordinary individuals in lots of different ways. First and foremost, it increases the cost of goods and services. Excessive litigation adds to the cost that businesses incur. And, unfortunately, those costs have to be passed down to consumers. A perfect example of that is, Louisiana's excessively high auto insurance rates. We are known, for sue and settle type of lawsuits in Louisiana, unfortunately. That excessive litigation drives up the cost that every single driver in Louisiana has to pay through their auto insurance premiums. We think that's wrong, and we are working very hard this legislative session, and will continue to do so in the future, to pass laws such as lowering the Louisiana jury trial threshold that will not only increase citizen access to our courts, but will also down the road help to lower the cost of of driving in Louisiana. Those are some of the things that we're interested in, and it's going to be a long-term, sustained effort, as I mentioned, to improve Louisiana's legal climate that will benefit individuals and businesses, workers all across the state.
Louisiana legislature was controlled by trial lawyer elements up until the Foster administration in the mid-1990s, as Melissa mentioned. A guy named Mike Foster got elected governor, and he had been in the contracting business, among other businesses, and had been sued a lot. A lot of those suits were frivolous, and he was a bit irritated about that fact. And he said when he was elected to a bunch of us folks in the business community, there's too much suing going on. That was basically what he said. He was a man of a few words. And as Karen will remember from Dow, and a number of other of us will remember, we all kind of got together and we did some pretty good work in the legislature in the mid-90s. Kathleen Blanco really wasn't a big pro-trial lawyer person, but we were all really fatigued on both sides after those adventures in the mid-1990s and as those new revised laws took effect. And when she called for a truce between the trial lawyers and the business community, we all kind of said, well, okay. She said, I'm not going to undo anything that's been done, but I don't want to do anything else. And so we all kind of went on pause. Things continued to deteriorate in terms of our situation in the courts. And as Melissa mentioned, while the general attitude of the business community and of those who do site selections and all of the other economic developers is really a whole lot of great things about Louisiana, and there really are. The legal climate is not one of them, as I think she made the case for that very well. And improving that legal climate is not going to happen overnight. And whatever we do in the legislature over the next several years, and hopefully there will be some good changes there, we still have a problem with the court system. And I guess the one thing, if I could say this as an old guy who's been around for all these years, is that industry and the business community is eventually going to have to wake up and understand that they're going to have to get involved in judicial races and change some of the judiciary out and play in that game that is totally controlled by the plaintiff bar, or we're still going to have problems, no matter what laws we pass and what help we get from governors and all that with the laws. We have to get involved in judicial races, and that's not an easy thing. It's a hard thing and it's costly. But if we don't do it, it's only going to get worse.
From the perspective of the chemical industry, the jury trial threshold is a very important issue because when lawsuits are consolidated and they allege that a number of lawsuits in the same case are under $50,000, say 5 lawsuits are alleged to be $49,999, you don't have a jury, but that's a $250,000 claim, and you're still not entitled to a jury. So the jury trial threshold of $50,000 doesn't really apply on a $250,000 claim. So this issue is very important to the chemical industry, not just to the insurance industry, which is how it's being sold in the legislature.
It's required to support life and the natural wildlife habitat that is such a key part of the Louisiana landscape that we all enjoy. It's required to manufacture anything. You can't make something without water, whether it's directly in the product like ketchup or latex paint, or whether it's used in the manufacturing process to add heat or remove heat or et cetera. So you gotta have water to make something. The coming tsunami refers to the new plants and plant expansions in Louisiana resulting from the availability of low-cost natural gas. In addition to existing industrial demand for fresh water, demand will increase as these new plants and expansions come online. And parallel with that is going to be increasing demand for fresh water from residential and commercial users as new people move into the area to, man the plants, build the plants, et cetera. So we're going to see increasing freshwater demand in really all of the sectors there, from residential, commercial to industrial. And like all natural resources, freshwater is a finite resource. And we have to manage the supply and demand of natural resources such as fresh water to meet the needs of the various consumers in an environmentally responsible way. That's the key. The Louisiana Department of Natural Resources is the state regulatory agency that performs that management task for the citizens of Louisiana.
Louisiana doesn't have a shortage of water. We have more than what is needed for the upcoming manufacturing boom that we're expecting to see. It's really not a matter of if we have enough, it's how do we manage it properly so that all the competing interests are properly addressed and the environment is properly addressed. Whether it be groundwater or surface water, what are you going to use? We have aquifers out there. We have the drinking water aquifers, the potable aquifers. There are also significant non-potable aquifers that can still produce quality water with some treatment. So those are all out there and available, and I think are going to be critical to the expansion that's taking place. I want to talk a little bit about some of the programs that we have at DNR that focus on making sure that we protect those resources and have it available to us. It is an asset that this state has that lots of other states where people may choose to do business do not have as an abundant supply of it. So one of the programs that we have, the Commissioner is going to talk about the groundwater program that's under the Office of Conservation. He's going to hit on some of those highlights. But another program that we have is called the Cooperative Endeavor Agreement Process. It's one that was passed in 2010 by the Louisiana Legislature to address the use of running surface waters of the state. And that process was basically in response to the Haynesville shale development up in the northern part of the state, where there were issues with groundwater use, some shortages in the aquifers up there, the Carrizo-Wilcox specifically. And so we were trying to encourage people to get into the surface water bodies for use of that water for hydraulic fracturing, but we needed to make sure it was being done responsibly. Additionally, we had to address some opinions by the Attorney General's office that basically a non-riparian landowner, to use those resources of the state, needed to do something that had a public benefit and also provide something of value back to the state of Louisiana. And so that is the process that we utilize to do that. That statute actually had a sunset on it. It was set to expire this year. However, Senator Long has a bill at the Louisiana Legislature this year. It's made it through the Senate and it's over on the House floor right now to extend it for another 2 years. And what that process does is it allows people to come in. Typically, folks will do an economic impact analysis rather than actually paying for the water. They'll do the economic impact analysis and show that they are having a significant impact on the economy of the state. In some cases, it is utilized for folks who will do a pipeline construction project. They may just pay in on that project rather than taking the time to do the economic impact analysis. And it's been used for other construction projects as well. I think overall it's been a good process. We put in low flow criteria to make sure that we're taking care of the environmental concerns that need to be addressed when we're doing this process. And then we also take a look at what other users are already on a system and make sure that those users are protected as well.
My office moved during the early stages of the Haynesville shale boom in 2008 to encourage oil and gas operators to switch from groundwater to surface water for their rig supply and for their hydraulic fracturing needs. We had a positive response from corporate leadership, with nearly 80% of water usage for oil and gas development in the play eventually coming from surface water. So that's going from no surface water to 80%. That's a really significant thing. And what we've done with the additional development of hydraulic fracturing around the state, we've applied this same philosophy. We believe that surface water should be used if at all possible. And that's the message that we're now giving industry that are developing the Tuscaloosa Marine Shale as well as the Brown Dents formation that Secretary Schutz mentioned a minute ago.
Collaboration means something. And I'll give you an example of the collaboration that we talk about in this region. EPA nationally so far has processed 44 greenhouse gas permits. The state of Louisiana, because it has delegated authority, has processed 12 greenhouse gas permits. The state of Texas still doesn't have full delegation. for one reason or another. We have proposed that, and hopefully that'll come sometime in June. But we found ourselves about a year ago where we were looking at well close to, and sometimes over, depending on the day, 100 greenhouse gas permits that were sitting in our office, most of which, all of which, were from the state of Texas. So we all know how important those greenhouse gas permits are to this region. We all know that along the Gulf Coast, and I heard this figure mentioned this morning, or figures like this, along the Gulf Coast, including Texas and Louisiana, that we anticipate between $150 to $200 billion worth of investment in the next 5 years because of unconventional oil and gas drilling. And that unconventional oil and gas drilling calls for unconventional approaches to doing things. And that means that state regulators and federal regulators are co-regulators, and we have to look at things, do things that provide the clearest pathway to get things done. So that takes us back to the greenhouse gas permitting issue in Texas. So we had this backlog. I talked to Gina McCarthy this last December in her office in Washington, and she said, "This is not a good thing. Fix it." So we went about devising a plan where we worked with the state of Texas. We moved people around within our agency, both internally within Dallas, and also drew on some resources around the country. But one of the most unique things that we did was with the state of Texas, we entered into a work share program where they started working in a parallel path on these greenhouse gas permits with us. They started working on, I believe the number was something over 30. At the same time, we were processing them. So what that allowed to happen was that the permits could move faster, and then as we move toward the end, when they get their own delegation, the companies are allowed to choose whether they want to stay with the state of Texas to finish the process, or they want to stay with EPA to finish the process. But you stop and think, and I know some of you in this room are familiar with this, the relationship between EPA and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality was not great. And that was an understatement. The relationship was not great. But because we were focused on the outcome, and because we knew we had to collaborate, because we knew that we're operating in a window of urgency when it comes to greenhouse gas permitting and the investments that were taking place along the coast, collaboration was the key to getting that environmental outcome that we all wanted. And to do so without sacrificing the quality of a greenhouse gas permit. So we have put out these permits. Some of them have been appealed to the Environmental Appeals Board, but the ones that have had a ruling on them so far have come out where the permits have stood. They've stood the ground of scrutiny. And the reason why is because there's a lot of quality that are in the permit that are the result of a lot of collaboration between the companies, between the state, between Dallas, and between Washington, D.C. So collaboration is just not a word to me. It's not a word to us. It's not a word to Peggy. It's something that we do because of many things. It also reduces transaction cost. Everybody in this room wants to reduce transaction cost because we all know where that reduction usually goes. And it's a good thing. So collaboration is important. Making a visible difference in the community is also important. And I heard this morning talking about education, talking about how you do things in communities. And so now, Mike, if you'll forgive me or allow me, talk about SASA a little bit. SASA came to us and we sat across the table in Dallas, Texas.
and they were very blunt. They said, we have a large investment that we are considering. And in the process of doing this, they essentially were asking for our guidance or our thoughts on the best way to proceed with the community. Environmental justice is something that we deal with every day. It's part of this administration's main driving efforts. Region 6 has many environmental justice communities. Mossville is an environmental justice community. So when Sasol came in to visit with us, we had a very frank, I think, robust conversation. That's what they came there for. And we exchanged views about what they hoped to do, what they intended to do. And I would say, as I listened to Mike this morning talk about what they were doing and being concerned about the people there, the 20% that they're concerned about, and how you go about getting those people into the job market, and how you make it sustainable, which is another one of Gina's things, is so important, because that is what smart companies think about. They think about sustainability, they think about their work pool, they think about the quality of their work pool, and in the process of all that, they think about the environment that their working people, the pool that their workers are coming from. They think about the environment that they live in and the environment that they're going to raise their children in. So when we have that sort of robust conversation that was initiated by the company, I think it's a lesson and it's a model for all of us in that we are trying to find those outcomes that best serve the community and best serve what's going on along the Gulf Coast of here. But I ask our folks who work in Dallas and in Houston and in El Paso and in Oklahoma, I say at the end of each day, and this comes from the bottom of my heart, at the end of each day, when you go home, I want you to be able to say to yourself that you are not a bureaucrat, that you are a public servant. And I think if you're able to say that, then you're going to have that environmental and economic outcome that we seek every day when we come to work. Thank you all very much. We feel like we have a lot of things in common. We're trying to get to a lot of the same environmental outcomes. At the same time, we're recognizing that those environmental outcomes have economic benefits that go along with them. So we believe we can get there by good collaboration and making the visible difference in the community for the people that we serve.
This is an unprecedented amount of expansion. Some people historically go back to the days of the 70s and say what we have in front of us as a state is a larger petrochemical expansion than when they first came to our state. So this is an amazing, unprecedented opportunity, and we're going to be up for the challenge for the state of Louisiana.
This is exciting for Louisiana. You know, we went through, in the last decade, we went through urban renewal in southwest Louisiana by hurricane. This is an opportunity for us to build the communities that we want, and Sasol is actively working to create that opportunity to do so.
I'm extremely encouraged. When you think about the impact on Louisiana, our economy and growth in the area, it's going to be just phenomenal over the next 5 to 10 years.
It's going to be a tremendous economic boon for the state. I mean, you're going to have a lot more taxpayers, a lot more taxes being paid. It's going to feed into our state government, our parish governments. I mean, it's going to help pay for everything that we need and use every day here in Louisiana to make our life good.
Okay. I think the most important thing is that we are a positive force in this community. We create a lot of jobs, we create a lot of opportunity, we solve a lot of problems for the state of Louisiana by providing chemicals and products that are needed by our industries, and we're going to be here for a long time. I think that's very important.
Just right now, the industry pays about $500 million a year in taxes to the state. It pays between $500 million and $600 million a year in taxes to state and local governments, the companies themselves, all of the people that work at the companies. We have tremendous jobs that pay well, that have a future. That's the bottom line. Our industry will continue to grow, it will continue to expand, it will continue to operate in an environmentally and health and safety secure manner, and we're very excited about that. We're bullish on Louisiana, and I think the more we get that message out, the more bullish Louisiana will be on us.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
Well, LCA.org, very easy to get to our website. We have any number of ways that you can access us. We invite people to visit the website and to contact us.